The Holy Gospel according to Luke, the 5th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. Once while Jesus was standing beside the lake of Gennesaret, and the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God, he saw 2 boats there at the shore of the lake. The fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little way from the shore. Then he sat down and taught the crowds from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we have worked all night long, but have caught nothing. Yet, if you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done this, they caught so many fish that their nets were beginning to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so that they began to sink. But when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." For he and all who were with him were amazed at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching people." When they had brought their boats to shore, they left everything and followed him. And this is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Please be seated. So I'll go ahead and admit it right now. I am not good with snark, Bruce.
Well, I am, so.
I know, that makes for an interesting marriage. I think I have a fairly good sense of humor, but snark just has a mean edge to it that I don't really care for. Now, I am not saying that I have never been snarky myself, because I have. And he knows it. But I genuinely do try to not be snarky to the person I'm talking to, because I think it's actually kind of disrespectful. Mea culpa. So maybe that's why I hear the gospel passage the way that I do. When Simon Peter says to Jesus, and here comes the snark, "Yet if you say so, I will let down the nets." Do you notice how different that is than a straight reading of it? "Yet if you say so, I will let down the nets." There's a difference. And I think I might be right in interpreting it that way. We'll talk about that. You see, they had been fishing all night long, which, as the Adam Hamilton book that we're reading for Lent explains, nighttime was a good time for net fishing because the fish wouldn't see the nets that were about to scoop them up. Now, Simon and his buddies had been doing night fishing on the morning when Jesus approached them, but for whatever reason, they caught nothing. So likely they were tired and hungry. They just finished cleaning, drying, and mending their nets, which was crucial, since a problem with the nets meant no income. They were about to head home for a meal and a nap. And then Jesus shows up, and without even asking, gets into one of their boats. Audacious enough. But then he has the nerve to ask these tired and likely depressed guys to put out a little way from the shore. Incredibly, they do as he asks. But as Hamilton in his book points out, they don't even dare to take a little snooze while he's preaching, because everyone on the shore who'd gathered to listen to Jesus would see them napping. So there Simon and the others were, a captive audience ready to drop. Now, we don't know how long Jesus preached that day. Was it a 10 to 12-minute sermon like the ones you've come to expect from us? Was it, well, okay, maybe longer. Was it an hour like some of the big box church preachers managed to get away with? I promise you we will never preach for an hour. Could have even been longer than that. We don't know. But we can guess that it might well have been a long one, because we know from other sermons that we've heard Jesus preach on other occasions, he was known to preach so long that he had to provide food for thousands of people before sending them on their way. So folks, you're lucky. So here Simon and his fellow fishers were, perhaps trying to stifle a yawn or two while trying to ignore the grumbles in their stomachs as they listened to him preach. But finally, he did wind things up. And just as they thought that they might actually be able to row to shore and go home, Jesus pulls one more audacious trick on them. He tells them, and notice, this time he doesn't ask them, but he actually tells them, put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch. And this is where I'm thinking Simon's snark drive kicks in. I imagine in his head, he's saying something like this. Seriously? Seriously? We've been up all night with nothing to show for it. We just listened to one of your all-day sermons, and it was good, Lord. No mistake about it. But still, we're tired, and we just want to go home. And in the text, we actually do hear Simon say to him, Master. And I have to wonder, was there any snark in his tone when he said the word master? Master, we have worked all night long, but have caught nothing. And then he utters what I believe must have been dripping with snark. Yet if you say so, I'll let down the nets. Surely you've heard that snarky tone before. Maybe it was on the lips of your spouse or your kids. Or maybe it was from a parent or a friend. Maybe it was on your own lips. The tone that says, you think you know best, but you don't know diddly. I'm the fisherman here, Jesus. You're a fantastic preacher, no doubt about it, but hey, I'm the expert on fishing. I know this little game of yours won't work. Fish who don't wander into our nets at night when they can't see aren't going to miraculously show up in our nets in the daylight. But since you're the hotshot preacher, the one with all the followers, hey, I'll do what you say. I'll let down those nets, and we won't catch a thing just like last night, and then we'll see who knows about fishing. And it wouldn't have taken a divine power for Jesus to guess that those types of thoughts were on Simon's mind. It would all have been in his tone. And yet, Jesus didn't defend his command. He just waited for Simon and the others to comply. Made no difference in his ability to do what he was about to do, whether or not they had faith that he would provide for them. They were just humoring him after all, weren't they? But Simon and his partners were in for the surprise of a lifetime when they teamed up with their nets, lowered them into the deeper water, and caught more fish than their boats could even handle. And when that happened, suddenly the snark was gone. It evaporated the moment Simon Peter saw the great catch of fish. In an instant of amazement and utter shame, he falls at Jesus' knees and admits what a total jerk he was. Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man. Or maybe in the language of our times, Lord, I really blew it. I totally dissed you. You really shouldn't have anything to do with me. Now, at that moment, Jesus could have taken Peter up on his offer, cut his losses, and looked for some new, more faithful disciples. Some who were perhaps less flawed in the faithfulness department than Peter was, or at least maybe less snarky about it. But he didn't, of course. Instead, with compassion born from one who surely recognized Peter's snark but chose to ignore it, instead of yelling at Peter for being the jerk that he was, Jesus says to him basically, no worries. Well, what he really said is, do not be afraid. Words spoken by God or God's messengers all the time to we humans when we encounter what cannot be explained. And that is reassuring. And then Jesus goes a step further. He says, from now on, you will be catching people, which probably intrigued Peter and confused him all at the same time. He knew about fishing for fish. Wait until nightfall, get your partners in their boats to lower one side of their nets while you lower the other. Then you wait until the temporarily blind fish wander into your trap, and voila, instant income. Indeed, he knew how to catch fish, although his previous night's performance would cast doubt on that. But catching people? What in the world did this holy man mean by that? And how in the world did this miracle-working rabbi think Peter could possibly do that? Which brings us to a full stop. While we consider all the times that Jesus has called each one of us to trust him and do what he says. Go to seminary and learn how to preach my good news, he said to a middle-aged woman about 15 years ago. Really, Lord? Look at me. I've got very little savings to afford school. How am I going to make it? And the oddity of a woman who could legally be classified as a so-called little person. Will people be so distracted by that they won't be able to listen to your good news? I mean, Jesus, give me a break. It must be really hard up for preachers if you're asking me to do it. Sound familiar to you at all? I mean, have you ever sensed God was asking you to do something that you really didn't want to do or felt that you weren't equipped to do? I think if we're honest, we'd have to admit that we've all been there. We've all been tired and hungry after an unfruitful, unproductive day, just wanting to go home and recover. And then Jesus, in the form of a person or maybe an opportunity, strolls along and says something that sounds crazy to you, tells you that you should ignore your fatigue and your misgivings and simply obey him. Yeah, sure, Jesus, I'll do that. As soon as the kids learn how to make their own dinners and put themselves to bed, yeah, I'll do that as soon as my spouse offers me a foot rub to help me relax. I'll do that as soon as I win the lottery, which I won't because I don't play. Really, Jesus, if you're going to ask me to do something, at least make it something plausible. Like maybe, I don't know, saying a quick Lord's Prayer before I nod off or something simple like that. Don't ask me to trust you to put one more thing on my already overcrowded plate. Let down your nets for a catch, he says to us, nevertheless. I wonder if Simon Peter had it all to do over again. Would he have hesitated for a moment? Would he have looked deeply into the Master's eyes and seen the serene command of the situation that Jesus had? Would he have been able to entrust his fatigue and his disappointment to this person making an audacious demand of him? And would he then have answered with simple trust and obedience, minus the snark? Would we? Would I? The focus of the Hamilton book that we're reading is on how we can learn from Simon Peter, flawed as he was, how to be a faithful disciple. How we can come to Jesus just as we are and allow him to develop us into something much more. And it's a great book to consider as we begin Lent. Because during Lent, we are invited to take an honest assessment of ourselves and see the areas that are ripe for transformation. And I have no doubt that all of us who will do so will find that although all of us are flawed in many and various ways, that all of us have also been called by Jesus to do much, much more. And no one is beyond redemption. Jesus knew who he was calling when he called his first disciples. They were the so-called people of the land, which in that time included fishermen, which meant they were the lower class, the least or the less trustworthy ones according to the society of their day. Now, to try and frame it in our terms, in our day, it might have been, well, the ones who were low income, blue-collar workers, or residents of the projects, the ones society discards or discounts. Friends, these are exactly the people Jesus first called to follow him, to establish his church. Now, of course, his followers also did include some wealthy people of high esteem. But the point is that all of us, rich, poor, white or otherwise, men and women, young and older, all of us are in the same boat with Peter and Jesus. All of us have been given the same command that Peter did, along with the same choice of response that he did. And all of us, like Peter, from time to time, disregard and even disobey the call to discipleship. But thank God that Jesus is as gentle with us as he was with Peter. He gives us another chance and tells us to not be flabbergasted when he starts to show us what he can do with our obedience, reluctant or not. And he gives us a job to do, a calling that goes beyond whatever it is that makes us money. He calls us to nothing more and nothing less than obedience. He calls us into the deeper waters where he assures us that we too will fish for people. So our choice is simple. Will we simply obey? Amen.